The rain came down in cold, relentless sheets that afternoon, turning Main Street into a glistening river of silver reflections. The air smelled of wet asphalt and fading summer. People hurried past, umbrellas raised, shoes splashing through puddles as they rushed for cover. But Daniel Hayes just stood there, frozen, his hand clutching a folded black umbrella, his eyes locked on the woman standing across the street. She was soaked to the bone, her hair clinging to her face, her pale blue dress darkened by rain, and beside her, a little girl in a yellow raincoat clung tightly to her leg. Daniel's throat tightened. His heart seemed to forget its rhythm for a moment. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't believe what he was seeing, because the woman in the rain, she wasn't supposed to be there. If you believe in kindness, in forgiveness, in the power of second chances, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us bring real, heart-touching stories like this one to life. A year ago, Daniel's world had shattered overnight. His wife, Emily, had died suddenly in a car accident on a quiet November evening, leaving him to raise their 5-year-old daughter, Lily, alone. One moment, they were a family laughing at the dinner table, and the next, he was standing in a sterile hospital hallway, holding Emily's wedding ring in his palm, staring at a life that no longer made sense. He had no idea how to move forward, how to be both mother and father, how to fill the silence of a home that once overflowed with warmth. The weeks after the funeral were a blur. He'd wake up at 3 a.m. to the sound of Lily crying, and he'd rush to her room, only to find her clutching Emily's pillow, whispering, "Where's Mommy?" He had no answer. He'd sit on the edge of her bed, stroking her hair, forcing a steady voice as he told her Mommy was with the angels now. But even as he said it, he'd feel something in him breaking apart. By spring, Daniel had built walls around his heart, walls made of routine, exhaustion, and quiet denial. He got up early every morning, made Lily's breakfast, dropped her off at kindergarten, and worked long hours as a mechanic at a small garage. In town every evening, he'd pick her up, help her with homework, and tuck her into bed. Then, when the house was quiet again, he'd sit alone on the porch, with a cup of coffee gone cold, staring at the empty chair beside him, the chair that used to be Emily's. But that day, the day it rained, something changed. It had started like any other Friday. Daniel had taken an early shift at the garage because the owner, Mike, needed to leave town around noon. The rain came suddenly, drumming against the metal roof, and by the time his shift ended, Main Street was slick with water. He was just stepping out of the shop, umbrella in hand, when he saw her. The woman, at first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The resemblance was uncanny. The same posture, the same tilt of the head, the same light blue dress Emily had once worn on their 3rd anniversary. His pulse pounded in his ears. It couldn't be. Emily was gone. He'd buried her. He'd held her cold hand in the hospital. But then the little girl in the yellow raincoat turned slightly, and Daniel's chest seized. It was Lily, his daughter. She was standing there, looking up at the woman with an expression that made Daniel's knees go weak. Half confusion, half recognition. He dropped the umbrella without realizing it. The woman looked up, her lips trembling as their eyes met across the street, and in that instant, the world seemed to stop. Her name was Claire. Daniel learned that later, after the shock faded enough for him to listen. She wasn't Emily, though for a haunting, breathless moment, he'd believe she was. Claire was a volunteer social worker who had recently moved to town. That afternoon, she had found Lily sitting alone near the park, lost and crying in the rain. Lily had wandered off after daycare, trying to find Mommy because Daniel had been a few minutes late to pick her up. Claire had found her, comforted her, and walked her toward the garage. But what struck Daniel most wasn't just her kindness. It was the uncanny, almost spiritual resemblance between Claire and his late wife. It wasn't merely looks. It was the way she spoke gently to Lily, the patience in her eyes, the softness in her smile. For Daniel, it was like watching a ghost, except this ghost had warmth, breath, and a beating heart. Over the next few days, their paths crossed again and again. Small-town life had a way of weaving stories together, like that. Claire volunteered at Lily's school for a community art program. She'd wave at Daniel when he picked Lily up. Sometimes she'd stop to chat, briefly, politely, never prying, and though Daniel tried to keep his distance, something about her presence started to chip away at the heaviness in his chest. For months, he'd avoided people he couldn't bear. Sympathy, but Claire didn't offer pity. She offered presence. She didn't talk about loss or death. She talked about little things, books, music, how Lily loved painting, how rain made her feel peaceful instead of sad. Daniel found himself listening, Smiling, laughing for the first time in what felt like years still. Guilt haunted him each time he laughed with Claire. A voice whispered in his mind, "You're betraying Emily." Each time he saw Lily giggle in Claire's arms, he felt both joy and sorrow twist inside him, because deep down he knew Lily was starting to see Claire as someone more than just a kind stranger. One evening, about 2 months later, Daniel found Lily sitting by the window, drawing with her crayons outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in orange and violet hues on the paper she had drawn. 3 figures, herself, Daniel, and Claire. "Who's that?" Daniel asked, though his voice already trembled. With the answer, Lily smiled, holding up the paper proudly. "That's us, Daddy, that's our new family." He couldn't speak, his throat burned. He wanted to tell her no, that family was supposed to be him and Mommy, but when he saw the pure, unguarded happiness in Lily's eyes, he couldn't bring himself to say it, because deep down, he wanted to believe it too. That night, he sat on the porch again. The chair beside him was no longer empty. In his mind, it was filled with memories, with laughter, with the echo of Emily's voice, and as the stars began to appear, he whispered softly, "I hope you don't mind, Em, but she's helping us live again." Life slowly began to shift. Daniel and Claire started spending more time together, not intentionally at first, but naturally. They took Lily to the park, shared lunch at the cafe, and helped with school projects. Daniel learned that Claire had once been engaged but lost her fiancé to cancer 3 years ago. She too carried her own scars, her own brokenness. Perhaps that was why she understood his silence so well, because she knew what it meant to grieve and still move forward. One rainy afternoon, almost exactly a year after Emily's passing, Daniel found himself walking down Main Street again. The rain was soft this time, gentle, cleansing. Claire and Lily were walking ahead, sharing an umbrella. Lily was telling some animated story, her small hands waving as she spoke. Claire laughed, that same warm, genuine laugh that had once been missing from Daniel's world. He stopped walking for a moment, just watching them. The image before him looked like a memory and a promise. At once she wasn't supposed to be here, he murmured under his breath, feeling tears mix with rain on his cheeks, but maybe she was meant to be. And in that quiet moment, he realized something profound. Maybe some people are sent into our lives to replace those we've lost, but to remind us that love doesn't end when someone dies. It changes shape, finds new vessels, and continues through laughter, kindness, and the courage to open our hearts again. Months passed, and Daniel finally began to heal. The nightmares became fewer, the guilt lighter. He visited Emily's grave one afternoon, holding Lily's hand beside her. Claire stood silently, her presence calm and steady. Daniel knelt down and placed a white lily on the grave. "Thank you," he whispered, "more to Emily than to anyone else, for loving me once, and for sending someone to love me again." When he stood up, Lily slipped her small hand into his, and Claire's into the other, and as they walked away, Daniel didn't feel like a broken man anymore. He felt like someone reborn. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Every click helps us share more stories of love, loss, and the power of second chances with people who need them most. Before you go, comment below and tell us, do you believe that people come into our lives for a reason? Because sometimes the ones we least expect, the ones who weren't supposed to be here, turn out to be the very reason we start living again.